everybody to the annual general meeting of Glenorchy City Council on this Monday, 29th of November 2021. I'm Mayor Beck Thomas and Chair of the annual general meeting. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet today on the land of the Muwinina people. Acknowledge and pay respect to Tasmania's Aboriginal people as the traditional owners and ongoing custodians of this land on which we meet, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. Just so we are aware, we have a number of members of the public in attendance tonight, and we also have a live stream to our YouTube channel and to Facebook. So please be aware that this meeting is being recorded, and if you do speak at the meeting this evening, it will be both audio recorded and live streamed to Facebook, so you may appear on the live stream. Also, briefly, just note our work health and safety statement. Council is a respectful workplace and we take the health and wellbeing of our aldermen and employees and members of the public who attend council meetings very seriously. So our meeting procedures this evening are pretty straightforward. We just ask that you are respectful of each other as we speak at tonight's meeting. That's item one. Item two, apologies. We have no apologies this evening to note. All aldermen are in attendance and we have a number of members of the public joining us this evening as well. I will note that under section 72B of the Local Government Act 1993, electors in the municipal area who are entitled to, who are registered to vote in local government elections in Glenorchy are also entitled to vote at the annual general meeting. So you may choose, if you wish, to vote on matters that we consider this evening. Moving on to item three, confirmation of minutes. We have a recommendation that the minutes of the 2019-20 annual general meeting of Glenorchy City Council held on Tuesday, 9th of March 2021 be confirmed. Do I have someone to move this recommendation?
Could I just ask for a slight alteration to the minutes before the motion is put? Just in the present, the collective of aldermen should read aldermen, not alderman. Just going forward, thank you. Apart from that, I'm happy to move the minutes.
And then present via video link, alderman should read alderman.
No, there's two of us, so alderman is fine there.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah, and on the present, just.
Oh yes, I'm looking at the other minutes. Yep, because I picked
they
that
need correcting as well.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Happy to move with that amendment, Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you.
Thank you. Someone to second? Deputy Mayor, Alderman Dunsby. Any discussion?
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Any discussion of the item?
Just Mayor, that I'll have to abstain because I wasn't present.
Okay. Please raise your hand to indicate if you are put the motion to the vote. If there's no further discussion, please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That is carried. So noting that Alderman Hickey abstained, we didn't have any votes from the floor. The motion is carried with all other aldermen voting for. Moving on to item 4, presentation of our 2020-21 annual report. We have a recommendation that Council accept the Glenorchy City Council annual report 2020-21. Do I have someone to move this recommendation? Alderman Dunsby, someone second? Alderman Richardson. Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. I'll just throw it over to the floor for some discussion. Thank you.
Any discussion of the item? No discussion of the item? Questions? I would like to speak to the item if no one else will. I think it's worth noting that we have had some significant activity occur in the 2021 financial year, and the annual report I commend to my fellow aldermen and to members of the public as a comprehensive reflection of of some of the challenges we've faced as a council during the financial year and of some of the achievements that we've made together with our community through the financial year. The General Manager's overview certainly points out quite a number of highlights from the 2021 financial year under our community plan goals, including noting that we've had record levels of development assessed within our city in our 2021 financial year, with 564 applications received. We adopted our Greater Glenorchy plan, setting out the vision for the three key precincts in our municipality, being Moona, Glenorchy and Claremont. We established the Glenorchy Jobs Hub, adopted the Berriedale Peninsula Master Plan, progressed the new planning scheme, which finally came into effect, a significant project that's taken many years of work and dedication from our staff here at council. We awarded the tender for the commencement of our Jackson Street landfill project, and also the commencement of the construction project for a new sports amenity building at Edie Street Recreation Ground. We invested significantly. We made the decision to invest significantly more funds in bushfire mitigation to keep our community safe through the bushfire season in particular. We endorsed the Glenorchy mountain bike strategy. We endorsed the Berriedale Peninsula Master Plan and our new community strategy. We delivered an economic recovery program, some really significant projects through the loan of $5 million from the Tasmanian State Government, that interest-free loan, which provided us with significant funds to be able to do some key economic recovery activity, including our Showcase Moona program, which we won a national award for recently, and in fact we won a national award for our full economic development recovery program. So lots of achievements through that period. We also improved our engagement with our community through our new website and our Let's Talk Glenorchy community engagement online platform. So it's really important to note those achievements. We're not without our challenges going forward, and certainly that was the message that I sort of reflected on in my piece in the annual report, that we need to have some honest conversations with our community going forward about how we are sustainable into the future ongoing, and how we strike that balance of delivering the service levels on the expectations that our community wants and deserves, whilst still keeping rates low. And that's something we take really seriously as a responsibility as a council, and want to engage more with our community on. If there's no further discussion of the item, I will...
I have a question.
Yes, Alderman Dunsby, you have a question?
Thank you. Possibly through you to the General Manager. Previous annual reports have included the attendance of aldermen at workshops. I noticed that's not included this year. Is there any reason why or why not that's been excluded?
Through you, Mayor, I might just refer to the Executive Officer, but I believe that it's because the attendance at workshops isn't a statutory requirement for inclusion.
That's through you, Mayor, that's correct, General Manager, and I also understand that the previous record of attendance were taken by the former Mayor, and those have somehow been lost in translation somewhere during the changeover, so we didn't have an accurate record. And correct, they're not a statutory requirement.
I understand that, but it had been a previous recording. Thank you.
For a long time.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby, and certainly I am keeping record of it, have been since the start of this financial year, so I expect it may be something we continue in our next annual report.
Thank you.
No further questions or discussion. I will go back to the mover, Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. In closing debate, you stole a few of my lines there, Mayor, but thank you. Perhaps I'd like to reflect that during this term of council, we've done some hard yards. We've had to make some hard decisions. We've had to work through the ministerial areas there. We've met all those, ticked things off. We're just starting to reach an area now where projects are starting to come to fruition, and I hope our community is seeing that the hard work that's gone on behind the scenes is now starting to come forward, and I think in this next 12 months we'll see even more again. So we've had COVID to deal with. It's been a tumultuous term and the things we've had to deal with, and I think we're going to come out the other end with looking much better than when we started. I commend the people around the table, I commend the staff and the community who are here today and who engage with us regularly and keep us on our toes, and I'm very happy to recommend the annual report to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. The recommendation to the vote, please raise your hand to indicate if you are for. That is Alderman Ball, Alderman Ryan, Alderman Dunsby, Deputy Mayor King, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Richardson, Alderman Fraser, Alderman Carlton, Alderman Sims. Please raise your hand if you're against. is carried, noting Alderman Hickey abstained from the vote.
Excuse me, can we remind the members of the public that they can vote?
Yes, thank you, Alderman Dunsby. So just reminding members of the public they can vote on any motion that we consider this evening.
As long as they're signed in.
As long as you've signed in and you're a elector in the municipality, yes, that's right. Thank you. Moving on then to item 5, questions on or without notice and notices of motion. So we start with questions on notice provided by Mr. Michael Hangan of Westmoona, who asked some questions around the Hobart City deal, which is mentioned in the annual report on page 9, and asked for some further details in regards to actions and outcomes on the new Bridgewater Bridge project and the activation of the Northern Suburbs Transit Corridor, as the Hobart City deal and partially the above projects are of high importance and significance to the ratepayers of Glenorchy City Council municipality. Mr. Hangan, you have been provided with an answer to those questions, and thank you for being here this evening. It's quite long, the answer, and all members of the public who are present this evening have also received, and aldermen have received a copy.
Sorry, Mayor, I don't believe it quite made its way.
Oh, right,
around
sorry.
the table for Alderman Hickey and I.
Okay. Would you like me to, our executive officer can certainly email you
We've got a digital copy.
a copy? Yep. So I was reluctant to read out the answer, given the length, unless anyone wishes me to do so. The answers will be included in the minutes of the meeting, which should be available shortly after our meeting. Are there any further questions without notice? No? If not, we shall move on then to item 5.1, which is a notice of motion received from Mr. Basil Giffard in relation to the use of the former Merton water catchment, and he has provided his notice of motion in writing. Would you like to speak to your notice of motion, Mr. Giffard?
Thank you.
And just might ask that you come forward to the chair there, just because the recording picks you up from the speaker in the middle here.
You require me to read the motion, or if we take it as it says printed?
Actually, I might just pause and just seek some clarification, General Manager. Do we need actually for someone to move the motion before Mr. Giffard speaks to it, perhaps? Or how shall we?
Ordinarily, we would
proceed?
have a motion on the table before we have any discussion.
So he would need to move and we need to second it before we can go.
That's
forward.
right. Yes, yeah.
Other than-
So our process typically, Mr. Giffard, is that when we have a motion before us, we ask for someone to move the motion, and you may choose to move the motion, and then we'll call for a seconder. And if we have a seconder, we will discuss the item. So I'm assuming you'd like to move the motion.
I will move
Yes.
the motion
Yes.
as recorded in the agenda.
Excellent, thank you. Do I have someone to second? Alderman Hickey to second.
I'll second it for the sake of debate. I think the intent is good.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Hickey. Over to you to open debate, Mr. Giffard.
Would you like me to read the motion or just speak to it?
You can just speak to it if you would like. Yep.
Thank you. It's 47 years since I sat at this, I think almost the same spot as an alderman. This item which I have presented has brought me out because of the urgency in the community. Now, in doing so, I am not being critical of anything the council has done. The agenda items, the policies which a council have on file, I would say I respect all of them, and up until now, you've done a great job, if I could say that. However, we are in a state of emergency in this community as far as housing goes. And in my over 50 years of living in this community, it is the worst that we have ever seen as far as the need for housing the need for development of further housing in the city of Glenorchy, the need for the emergency housing because we are drastically short and our community is suffering very, very badly. I'm also a retired officer of the Salvation Army, so I'm aware of, and I currently am engaged as a retired person in next door from here. And so I am very well aware of the dire necessities for us to do something. Whilst I have made suggestions on my motion, I also recognise the fact that I might not have dotted the I's or crossed the T's, but the motivation of bringing this forward is one of honesty, is one of dire need in this community, and I would reflect on, as we've noted in the motion, I would reflect on the statement of commitment on housing from this council. Council adopted a new statement of commitment on housing to acknowledge its commitment to be proactive in attempting to address the challenges of housing in the city of Glenorchy. Proactive is a very identifiable word, and it means has some significant meaning. I would reflect on how communications used to be conducted by flags, pulling the flags up the mast of ships to communicate with each other. And I would say now is the time for us not to put the flag up the mast on ropes, but to nail our flags to the mast post. And in the light of that, I would request that the motion which I have, either in its entirety or it's what is said, that it be taken in a way that we will, as a council, identify the things that need to be done and be proactive in doing them. And I think probably I don't need to say any more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giffard. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Fraser.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, some people in the community may not know, but Mr. Giffard, as he just mentioned, is a former alderman of Glenorchy City Council and a very well-respected Glenorchy community member. And I thank you for the time and effort you've taken to put the rationale together for this particular motion. As you've said already, your motion here is a clear warning signal from someone who has very strong ties to this community that we have a housing crisis on our hands. And there's been a lot of commentators talking about this in the media as well, that it is really reshaping our community and society and potentially creating a two-tier society of citizens. Those that own real estate, those who will never be able to afford it. And those of us in local government, I think, need to shoulder some of this blame, because it is local government that is primarily responsible for identifying and releasing land for development. And in my view, the only way to relieve this problem is to rapidly increase the supply of housing. And of course, if we don't want to increase urban sprawl, this housing supply will have to be, as Mr. Giffard points out in his motion there, will have to be medium density and will have to be close to public transport and retail hubs. So it's for that reason, look, I really do strongly support more development around the rail corridor in Moona and Glenorchy. And I know this is something we've discussed as aldermen over the past year as well. However, I think it's taking too long. It's just simply taking too long. And making necessary changes to encourage more medium density development seems to be progressing at glacial pace, when it needs to become really urgent and a focus for the council in the next year. And I really hope that we can collectively articulate some clear actions in the council's annual plan for the next year around this. I think the officer's response to Mr. Giffard's motion clearly sets out that the particular area that Mr. Giffard points out for residential development is perhaps not suitable, but I completely recognise the intent and urgency of Mr. Giffard's motion. So as an alternative, I would suggest an amendment to the motion with your permission, Mr. Giffard. And that is essentially, and it is radically simplified, and so I by no means mean any disrespect from the effort you put in to your original motion, but simply that Glenorchy City Council urgently review suitable areas for medium density development in Moona and Glenorchy and prioritise the work necessary to prepare these areas for residential development. If I'm happy to move that as well, I'd have to get the movers' permission to make that amendment, but that's what I'm proposing. Need a mover and second.
Permission of the mover and second.
Permission, so that would be Mr. Giffard, correct?
Yes, he
The
moved it.
mover and the
Yeah.
seconder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Hickey as well, sorry, yeah.
Yes.
I would, in the context of that, it would allow council to progress, hopefully, with expediency, and not just wait for someone else to do something, but rather we be, in the words of our policy, be proactive. And I mean proactive, setting an example for not only this community, but for other communities in this state and maybe even other communities nationally, because of the urgency of this, and in the light of what you've said there, I think that would cover what I was really trying to get at in doing and presenting this motion.
Well, we just
Oh,
we
sorry.
would need permission of the seconder. If,
Before I give permission, I am very supportive of the intended motion and also the amendment. But I think this council has lots of things that are urgent and prioritised, et cetera. This really needs to be taken as a number one priority in this community, and not just words and more plans and more strategies and more everything else. We actually need to move on this. It's the biggest central issue in this city, let alone anywhere else, because it affects education opportunities, health outcomes, families staying together, domestic violence, poverty in general. And when you look at the report from the Hobart City deal, it is absolutely atrocious that 3 years into that deal, there's less than 500 houses that have been built in what has been known as a crisis for at least the last 4 years. And the Salvation Army are obviously at the face of this. So I do second this or support it on the proviso that it is attended to as a major priority.
so that's your endorsement of the alternative motion. So with the permission of the mover and the seconder, we will now consider the alternative motion that Alderman Fraser read out. Would you just mind reading that out again, please, Alderman Fraser?
That Glenorchy City Council urgently review suitable areas for medium density development in Moona and Glenorchy and prioritise the work necessary to prepare these areas for residential development.
Thank you. So my understanding, just to clarify before we go on further with the debate, is, General Manager, that if this motion is supported this evening, we are required to consider it at the next council meeting, which is obviously in about 35 minutes' time, which makes it a little bit difficult
Or the one after.
So that's what I guess I would be recommending then, that we consider it at we're presented with a report on that at the December, December, which would be, does that sound?
I'm just wondering whether possibly at the next council meeting there could be a procedural motion just noting that. So we covered off on the fact that the Act is telling us we need to progress it at the next council meeting. So procedural motion just noting that that this resolution, if passed, was passed, and that
Why it's being considered.
officers, given the short time
Oh,
span,
right, I see.
officers
Yeah.
will be bringing the report to January. Then I think we covered legally
So
as
we
well.
would do that tonight, at
Yes,
tonight's
yes.
meeting,
Yep.
if that be passed. Yep. Good, okay. Well, thank you, Alderman Fraser and Alderman Hickey and Mr Giffard. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Ryan, yes.
Thank you. I am supportive of this. It is a crisis, we all know that. I'm just wondering why we would restrict it to Moona and Glenorchy, or do you mean the municipality of Glenorchy?
I think I was using Mr Giffard's original motion to set the context where he mentions
Glenorchy Township, the original Glenorchy Township, which is this area up here between Tolosa and Chapel, that's crying out for development.
If I may, it also reflects what we have committed to in our Greater Glenorchy plan in relation to medium density housing opportunities in Moona and Glenorchy in particular.
Mayor, can I just ask a question?
Yep.
I'm just a bit concerned about that. I think Alderman Ryan's point about Greater Glenorchy is probably relevant, because whilst our intention might be that Moona and Glenorchy are priorities for this council, it may be that some land is identified that's easier and quicker and faster to develop, that is not technically Moona or Glenorchy. Could be Claremont or somewhere else. So whilst, yes, we want to stick to our original plan as much as we possibly can for the sake of transport and garbage collection and services, if there was an identified plot that we own and we can contribute to this and speed it up, then we shouldn't have anything off the table. So I would actually like, can I move the amendment to the amendment?
I guess your question would be, would Alderman Fraser like to
Reword it
Sure.
to be brought up?
to the city of Glenorchy.
Sure, yeah.
The municipality.
Yep, no, that seems reasonable.
Mr Giffard, would you be happy with that?
Yes, but I think the urgent need is in this central area. We've got the most capacity for development. We've got 6,800 people in this community just up here between Chapel and Tolosa Street, and population density probably 2.5 people per household, and it's housing area which could easily be developed with the right incentives, as has been allowed in the planning by council for medium density housing in that area. Now it might take a few years to do it, but with the right incentives, these old housing department areas which we've got up here, and I live 33 Tolosa Street, just up the road. These old housing department area, and again, and another thing, I was on council when we were on state housing when we were building a lot of these areas back in the 50s and 60s, and they are virtually obsolete now, and we desperately need to do it. This area is probably the most attractive area to actually do what we do. It'll keep people within the context of our existing resources, transport. It will improve transport up Tolosa Street. It will help develop other areas in that area, increase the density of the population in those areas. Absolutely open to development. I'm not against doing it in other areas, but don't sacrifice this area by diverting widely and missing the point.
Can I just get that clarified? Because I'm a little bit worried that you're going to pull down houses that may not be good, but people have got homes.
Oh, yeah.
And
It's not everyone.
no, but there's a lot of houses that have to go to make new houses, and we might be able to get, considering the need is something like 6,000 or 7,000 houses in Tasmania now.
Yeah.
I would argue with your, I would like to keep it broader so that in case we can find another subdivision.
I've got no argument with keeping it.
Because I don't want to be throwing out a whole lot of people here.
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of trying to stick to our meeting procedure regulations where we can, so I'll bring it back to the debate or questions. Any further discussion or questions? Alderman Dunsby.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the intent that Alderman Ryan and Alderman Hickey have brought to the discussion. I would hate to see that something that may come up with us might be limited by a motion that has just Moona and Glenorchy in it. So I'd be very supportive of the change to the motion, that it is reflective, but obviously when we go through to what the things to do, those priorities you've identified are certainly going to be at their forefront when we have those considerations, and hopefully those of the officer as well. So I ask that the motion as we've got now, just reflecting that citywide, that we're not hampered or limited by something that may come up for us that we can develop.
Thank you. Alderman Sims.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
Great. Thank you. Just through the Mayor, I'd just like to acknowledge the effort that's been put into this motion. I think you've done a great job here, Basil, and I think it's really important that the community do drive this kind of message to councils and help them make it a priority and let them know that they're behind them as well. So well done for that. I also acknowledge the content of it. It was very well written and made a lot of sense. I can see the focus on the Merton area, and I understand the officer's response to that and the recommendation around council's limitations and barriers, but I think it's something we do need to explore, and this is a perfect opportunity and timing for it around with the implementation of the new Tasmanian planning scheme. So I think, you know, it's all kind of fallen together quite well, looking at strengthening this. Also, just in addressing some of the conversation very quickly around where it should happen and things like that. That's the whole point, I think, of us moving it into the December meeting. The officers then can go back and have a look at all of our strategic plans, the state strategic plans around housing, Hobart City deals, all those bits and pieces that we need to capture and consider when putting a recommendation up at the next meeting, and also thinking about looking at what we can take from Basil's motion as well. And help drive that with the community. So well done, appreciate it.
Thank you, Alderman Sims. Any further discussion of the item? Alderman Carlton.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for bringing forward this motion tonight. Just in addition to what has already been said around the table, I do support us looking outside of the Glenorchy and Moona areas. I know from the stats that we see, Glenorchy is definitely the area that has the most amount of housing stress, and we definitely need to focus on that. But actually Claremont is the second highest area too. So expanding out the motion is something that I do support, so long as we're using the data to be able to really focus in on the key area of Glenorchy, then Claremont and then Moona. So with the housing data that we receive, they are clearly the areas that have the most amount of unmet need, and that's something that I'm pleased to support the amendment to include those particular areas.
Thank you, Alderman Carlton. Mr. Steenbergen.
I absolutely support this motion. I think it's long overdue. And the second point is this motion really should be as general as possible, because the real discussion will be at the next meeting when you have the council officers' report, when you start considering details like infrastructure and zoning and all the other complications. I absolutely support it, and I hope everyone else here does too. Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Steenbergen. Any further discussion?
The original motion or the new motion?
Well, this is my understanding is Mr. Giffard and Alderman Hickey have endorsed those changes, so this is the motion that we are discussing.
So, thank you. If I may, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Giffard, for stimulating conversation around this. Now, as you can see, you have stimulated a lot of conversation, which, and as Alderman Fraser and Alderman Hickey said, we need to do a lot more than be stimulated. So,
Absolutely.
we're grateful for that. We are talking with your motion more about rezoning from my perspective than just finding land. We're always looking to find land that the community are happy for us to sell. You know, it's this balancing act. We think that's a good block to sell, or a good 5-acre piece to sell, but then some people in the community say, no, you shouldn't sell that. So it's a balancing act as to how we go there. But I'm with you as far as housing goes. We need to responsibly fill any council spots that we don't need for other resources. But what we're talking about is rezoning it, and rezoning the corridor if we can, if people put applications in, rezoning areas that might need to adapt to what.
Question, doesn't this area through here already meet the compliance for doing 3 medium density housing, 3, 4 up through this area?
Until you get to the park, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But up through this area, it already meets our requirements.
Yeah, what I'm saying is we're looking at the potential of investors coming in and rezoning the corridor and things of that nature to get more density in those areas. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but as Alderman Hickey said, there's a massive urgency, and we appreciate as much as we can because most of us live in a home, but we can't appreciate it like those that don't live in a home. So thank you again for the stimulation of that conversation, and we will forward this as quickly as possible from this point on. Because I mean, I put a motion several years ago. There's 5 acres sitting at the top of Edie Street Sports Ground, or 7 acres that I'd love us to be able to develop. That joins on to some other housing areas, and we found a way to do that before, but some members of the community didn't want us to do it. So it's this balancing act again of what you do when you get a petition of 200 people saying don't do it. When you think you've got a good idea, it's hard to. But maybe the community feels differently these days, so we can retry that. There are other areas that we can retry. So thank you again.
It's a matter of making it attractive to everyone.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just have a question, if I may, General Manager, to you, or perhaps Director Fox or Riali, in relation to the current work plan of council. And obviously, whilst I absolutely 100% support us prioritising this, and we have made the statement of commitment, as Mr. Giffard refers to, I'm just, I guess, I'm interested to know if we prioritise this work over the next month, will that mean we are speeding up things we are already doing? And will there be any things that will mean we won't do as a result? You know, very conscious that we have a work plan, and whilst, yes, we may identify things throughout the year that are priorities and urgent, it's important that we consider the impact on other activities as well. So I'm just keen to explore that.
Through you, Mayor, I might start off and then perhaps throw to Director Fox in terms of the workload on existing staff. But I think one of the things that we would be doing as part of a report such as this is looking at the existing activities that are already being undertaken. So there has been extensive work done in relation to the supply, identifying the supply and demand for land in Glenorchy. There's also, I think the word glacial pace is probably apt in terms of the city deal, in terms of we have long identified a densification area along the main road corridor, which also picks up Glenorchy and Moona centres, and potentially in Derwent Park, and also a densification area out at Claremont. So we've identified these areas where we want to move that work forward. We've also got a greenfield development precinct under the regional strategy out at Black Snake Road in Granton. So we're doing some work on that in terms of identifying what the future servicing needs may be. The complexity around that is, of course, multiple landowners and bringing them together, to work on that work. So that's probably my general comment, that there is. The council officers are very mindful of this crisis as well. We're doing what we can to move this forward, recognising, of course, that council doesn't build houses. So one of the things that we've noticed over time is that council officers are, as was mentioned earlier in the meeting with the annual report, council officers are assessing record numbers of applications, and most of those are for housing. The issue is that only a proportion of those ends up getting built, and so we're very keen to promote more housing in our community, more people living in our community. We're all for that. So it's certainly a challenging situation. So that's through you, Mayor. That's sort of a comment about the existing status, but Director Fox may have further to add.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. You're right, there is a very large workload of staff across council, and a large number of people who are very concerned about the state of housing in our municipality, and are doing everything we can as a council to try and address that issue. It is difficult for council to to provide housing when, as Tony said, we don't build houses. So it is about what land we can identify, what planning controls and zoning we can put in, how we can facilitate residential development in our community, how we can think about provisions and planning schemes that enable residential development in commercial areas, for example. So when we released the Statement of Commitment on Housing, we developed quite a detailed action plan behind that commitment, an internal document, and there's a housing working group that meets monthly and bi-monthly to progress that work. Now, we have behind the scenes been doing quite a lot of work in this space, but I think it is timely to bring that forward to council to enable aldermen to understand that work and to maybe provide some priorities for us in our way forward. As you would be aware, a lot of this is political advocating. So how do we get more social housing built in Glenorchy? How do we get more investment in housing in Glenorchy from the federal and Tasmanian governments? So certainly bringing that to council would really help us in advocating for that investment in Glenorchy. We can do everything we can from a council perspective, but those big dollars won't come from council, they'll come from other levels of government. Happy to bring that forward in December.
With respect, this year is the time to bring it forward politically.
Yep.
Correct.
That's right, thank you.
Now is the time.
Thank you, Director Fox. Any further discussion of the item? No, I will go back. Oh, I should, that was a question, a long-winded question for me, so I, of course, am supportive of the motion. Thank you, Mr. Giffard, for bringing it before us this evening. You see people through your work at the Salvos, you know, daily, I imagine, who are facing the crisis that is homelessness and couch surfing, and it's absolutely horrific experience for people and hard to watch. I've worked in an elected office together with Alderman Hickey, and almost daily we had people coming in who were struggling to find housing, and it's just heartbreaking. So wholeheartedly support that we do what we can as a council to prioritise this and to do what we can to support the increased supply of housing, which is what's required.
In response, in response to the manager, if we cannot get to the subject of the issue immediately, then I would like to see council identify this publicly and strongly on the where and the wherewithal that council is proceeding along this line, so that it can generate interest and activity in the areas that we were just talking about, in the political areas, and that is the area where you can, as council, achieve something this year. Believe me, you can. We'll have a national election in a matter of a few months.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Giffard. As spokesperson for council, I'm happy to sing from the rooftops and advocate, and may even get you to help me with that. So
absolutely.
So yes, absolutely, you have my word. So if there's no further discussion, I will put the motion as before us up on the screens there. Mr. Giffard, you get the opportunity to close debate, seeing as your open debate. So is there anything you want to say in closing?
No, I think we've said enough.
Remembering members of the public, you can vote. So I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand to indicate if you're for. That is Mr. Steenbergen, Mr. Hangen, Ms. Alford, Ms. Swiredek, Alderman Bull, Mr. Giffard, Alderman Ryan, Alderman Dunsby, Alderman King, Mayor Thomas, Alderman Richardson, Alderman Fraser, Alderman Carlton, Alderman Hickey, and Alderman Sims. The motion is carried.
Is that unanimous?
Yes.
You just said no and opposed it.
It's Marina. I couldn't see who's in the back corner. It's Marina. It's okay. She's not an elector in the area. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on then to, continuing on with motions without notice. Do we have any motions without notice this evening? No? Well, I think that brings our annual general meeting for 2021 to a close at 5:46 p.m.
Longest annual general meeting. That's good.
5:46 p.m. Thank you to those who have joined us via the live stream. Thank you to members of the public for joining us tonight as well. We'll be back in about 15 minutes for our November council meeting. See you soon.